But I want to tell you how I flew to San Diego and stayed at a hotel without paying a dime for any of it. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of Life Money You, where we talk about life, money, and hopefully you will get some fabulous tips to help you out in your financial journey. We're just two guys on the journey to financial freedom ourselves. So just sharing lots of thoughts and ideas. Before we get into some of these important nuggets that we're going to share here, do you know, Bjorn, why I don't trust stairs? Because they're always up to something.
Oh, come on. You can do better than that. I am gonna use that one with my girls. I think that's gonna work. I think it's gonna work.
They're getting worse. And just when I think there's no room to get worse, they do. So I go to the ends of the earth to find these, and
I like it.
Yeah. Speaking of stairs and people's homes, I think a lot of times people stay at home during vacation, and in the traditional thinking of financial services, I wonder if you've ever thought about this. Where does vacation fall in terms of needs or wants?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think not necessarily pre-pandemic, but there was always a sense of it being in the need category because of the importance of getting away, having a mental health break, probably maybe a bit more dependent on your stage of life or your stage of work or the type of job or just how busy it was. So I definitely feel as though there was good reason for it to be brought in the need category. I think if you had to give one answer, you would probably almost always put it in the want category, just because there are other options. You don't have to always do that, and vacations mean a lot of different things to different people. Now that we've gone through the pandemic, I think you could start to begin to see the pent-up demand to go on a getaway and to really get away, like out of the house getaway, since we were all hanging out in our houses so much. And it probably moved up on the need category, the need side of that equation, a little more than ever before. So, yeah, I think you can put it in both camps. I'm sure we'll go there today, but we'll talk more about what level is right for you and almost how can you right-size your vacation so that it can fit into both camps, I guess. It can fit as a need, it can fit as a want, but you can afford it in both cases. That's the important part.
Yeah, good term, right sizing. I agree with you. It's if we were to ask the same question about cell phones, need or want, and I think some people would adamantly defend both, that they don't need it and others absolutely need it. I would probably be in the camp of needing it. I don't know that it always has to be exactly what everyone is Instagramming, and I think this is where when you start interpreting what would give you the value of the mental vacation that a lot of people need. And I think that's really what it comes down to for me, because I have found that sometimes going to places matters less than what I do, which is sometimes just sitting around a pool or just taking a walk or whatever it might be. I wanted to talk to you today about that because I think a lot of people are struggling with some of these questions, and especially as budgets get a little tight and people are thinking about vacations. And right now, I think is a kind of common time to take vacations here in the summer, even into the fall. Some people reserve them for winter because maybe they are busiest in the summer. But we have, I think, personally explored a lot of different options and a lot of different life hacks for vacations because we're trying to figure out how to get the most bang for our buck, especially with you, with 6 people in your household. And for me, I'm married to a teacher who only gets certain times off, so sometimes we have to make some sacrifices there. So I'm really interested in talking about getting today the vacation that you need in a way that fits your budget. So something we're working on ourselves here. And in fact, you just came back from a trip here, and I think in many ways it was a great way to do it because you went camping. So I would love to hear about how you and the family found a remote piece of land, pitched a tent, what it was like to do your laundry in the stream, hunt for your own food, because I think that's a really cheap way to go. So I would love to hear a little bit more about this because we haven't talked about it since you got back.
Yeah. We only got a couple meals the whole time, but no, we glamped. We definitely did glamping. If you're not familiar with that one, we were in air-conditioned cabins. We had meals provided to us, so it was slightly different than camping, although we were down in Oklahoma where, being from the Midwest, when it's 99 and humid, I am not quite built for that, or at least not used to that. So that was definitely the camping part of the camping trip that was a little shocking. Yeah, we went to a family camp that was down in, I think it's Concord, Oklahoma. It's actually just across the border from Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And we've done it before. It's a camp that my wife actually grew up going to. And it's really fun. There's a lot of great family things to do. It's definitely geared around kids mainly. There's a pool with water slides, and there are horses you can ride and fields for different games and air conditioning, which was nice. And then there's a dining hall where they provide all the meals. So we had a great time. We definitely had to think through how we were going to get there. In the past, when we had less kids, we actually flew to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I actually happen to have family there. So we've actually been able to double the trip up and see a few more people, which was a great use of time and money. But this time around, it was all 6 of us. And if you can picture the maximum amount of things that you could stick onto a minivan, we had that. We had a car top carrier. We had a bike rack. We had 3 bikes in the back. We had a dog packed in there. We had floor-to-ceiling luggage. There was some room in there for 6 people. I'm not sure how, but we were able to find space, and we did decide to drive. So the great thing is, as you head further south, gas prices did get a little bit cheaper. Really, I guess it was more at various spots they got cheaper. It was actually a few spots where it wasn't any cheaper than Minnesota, which was, I thought, just an interesting part of it all. But it was definitely more cost-effective to make that trip. But 11 hours in the car down to Arkansas is a bit of a journey with some young kids. So they did pretty well, but it was definitely a long trip. We were glad to be out of the car. So we went to Fayetteville, and then we spent a few days there, and then we actually went over to this camp together. And it's one way you can do it. Glamping, or whatever you want to call it. Family camp. Some of you may have been to like a ranch before, or some other kind of camp where you stay in a cabin and you get meals, but you're sort of doing a lot of things outside. That was the style that this was, and it was really fun to just be there for a few days. It wasn't overly expensive to do it. It wasn't like we were paying for an Airbnb or having to do all of our meals as a all-inclusive package. And because we actually went with a church, actually, and so there were a bunch of families that were there. And so I think that helps you share the cost, too, across a bigger group.
So tell me about the experience. You roll up into this camp. What is this like, and what are the cabins like? Can you pull right up to your cabin? Do you load your stuff in there? And then how big are they? Are you all one family in a cabin? Paint the picture for me.
Yeah, so you drive up. There's a big green field, sort of dirt gravel road as you come in, and you start to see some of the buildings. And one kind of really fun thing for my kids was that everything is walkable, but it's probably like a 5-minute walk or 10-minute walk maybe over to different buildings. So it's a pretty big property, and it's really fun for my kids because we brought their bikes, and we just told them that they could go wherever they wanted to. And so we gave them freedom to just bike wherever. And they loved that. So all the kids have bikes. So it actually looks like a bike shop when you pull up, because there's about 100 bikes with all the kids. It had to have been 100 bikes and that many kids there at this camp. And then we were actually able to be in one of the nicer cabins, which was nice. Benefits of my father-in-law having organized the camp for 40 years. So we had some first dibs on where we stayed. But we were all in the same room. It's a pretty basic room, 1 bed and 2 bunk beds. So our baby, we had a pack and play that we brought, and then my older kids were all in the bunk beds, and then we were in the bed, my wife and I. And yeah, we don't do that very often. I don't think in any other place or situation would we ever choose to all be in the same room, because if one person decides that they want to wake up or not be quiet, then we're all awake. And so one hack that we found was to bring 2 box fans, not one, but 2 box fans, to make sure that we had the white noise going to help cancel out some of the noise. So we did do that. We had both of those running most of the time. And in my family, at least, we still have a couple kids who nap in the afternoon. So that got a little bit tricky. We had to move our baby around to a few different locations because it just had to work out that way so that other people could get up earlier than she did. Yeah, that worked out well.
I just woke up from my nap, Bjorn.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
So I appreciate that.
White noise?
Yeah.
No. They had 4 rooms that were all close together. So my in-laws were in their own room right next to us, and then my sister-in-law was actually in her own room. So we did have actually a few other options. Every night we were in our family room with all 6 of us. And thankfully they did really well, which was great. We laxed a little bit on the what time everybody went to bed and stuff. They were tired. We were all tired. But we slept pretty well overall. Usually you don't plan to sleep well. You just know it's going to be all day out in the heat, and then you're going to be tired, but you're going to wake up in the night, and we thankfully didn't have to get up too many times.
Gotcha. And showers, bathrooms in these cabins as well?
Yeah, this one actually did have a bathroom and a shower, which was nice. Not all the places on the property have that. I think actually a few of the buildings have kind of a community shower, so that is only working in certain situations. I think my wife describes growing up, they would always stay in a place more like that. So you have kind of a bathroom down the hall that you just walk down to, and multiple families would take turns sharing that, or I don't know how it all worked. But yeah, they've really grown it over time. I think they actually didn't used to have air conditioning, which is hard to believe because that is really hot to not have air conditioning. So I think, again, growing up, it sounded like they just did a lot of fans and they never slept, basically. But thankfully now they have that in all the buildings. And then we would just walk to different places. We'd walk to where we were meeting. We'd walk to the dining hall. The food was actually really good. And so they have a well-oiled machine going there. And they're used to having big, huge groups of, I think there were 250 of us or something, 50 families that came.
So describe this dining hall situation. Is it like a cafeteria? What are they serving? 3 meals a day?
Yep, it's kind of like a school. You walk in, there's this huge hallway where everybody lines up at your mealtime. What I find fascinating is that this camp is so big and they're so used to this. They actually had 2 groups at the camp. We were there with a different group. So they were doing their own camp and having their own meetings, and then we would actually go, I think, at different times to eat. So they would stagger the meal times. And so you just show up, you get in this long line, and the people that work there are just shelling out tacos or pizza, or it was all whatever could be done in mass and scale. And then they had a separate section for drinks. You should get your own drinks. They had another section for, I think they had just like toast all the time for any kid that isn't going to eat the meal. So one safe option, and fruit and coffee. And so it just was always there. And you serve yourself. And then the whole dining room are just these super long tables with benches and chairs and that sort of thing. And you just sit wherever you want and eat, and then you bust your own dishes. And they got, again, a huge kind of area that you just walk into and drop off your dishes. So just like a cafeteria, just like a school kind of. And it's pretty nice.
So, yeah, you have to look at the menu and decide if you want it off the vegan or the fruitarian or the pescatarian.
Exactly. Exactly.
You just... only coffee for some people. Awesome. So what about the activities? Is the camp pretty large? Obviously, it sounds a little bit rural. I mean, lakes, ponds, trees, bugs. What's the entertainment while you're there?
Lots of bugs, which was interesting. It's always fun to see bugs in different parts of the country because they're different and bigger.
And the accents are different?
Yes, the accents are different. Yep, a little southern accent. And yeah, this actually has a pool that's right kind of in the center of the camp, and that's where pretty much everyone hangs out as much as it's open. And then on the far end, there was a whole pasture where they have horses. So they do trail rides for adults and older kids where you just go in a big line and they take you for a bit of a ride. And then they also have pony rides for younger kids. So they have actually somebody holding the horse, and the kids wear a helmet and they just go in a big circle, and then you just take turns doing that. So again, I think it's one of the only places my girls have ever ridden a horse or ever will ride a horse, unless we end up with a horse someday, but I don't plan on it.
Never say never.
Exactly. But there are 4 of them, so I guess if you divide it by 4, it's maybe cost effective. They also have a creek that runs down the side, and so they have the lakefront, as they called it. It wasn't a lake, but it was a creek that has water slides and one of those huge blobs where you jump down and kick the other person off the other end. If you cross the bridge to this kind of, I don't think it's quite an island, but it's this other area across the creek, they have a high ropes course. And so for people that like to do that, I'm not a huge high ropes course kind of person, but some people just love that. And you can do a climbing wall and do all these kind of challenges to try to test your ability in that situation. And then they have canoes. You can fish. We went canoeing. And the creek is, in some places, pretty shallow, so you can get out and walk around. And so there's really a ton of different things to do. I'm just waiting for the golf course to be built. Apparently that isn't on the radar quite yet, but I take advantage of that.
The people running the pony rides are hoping for that too, because you came back every couple hours to get another ride. Is it one of the benefits of something like this is that it's this contained environment? You can let your girls run around unsupervised because you're in this camp bubble. How important is that as opposed to a vacation where you're in a hotel in the middle of a city or in a high traffic area or something different or more urban?
Yeah, that is a huge part of this that I think the adults love too, is just the ability to let the kids go off a little bit more. We live in a very busy city, and even at home, we can't really let them go wherever. And thankfully, between our house and our neighbor's house, we actually got a gate, and so we have a shared yard almost, and there are neighbor kids. But on this kind of trip, you're right, that if we were staying at an Airbnb or going on a different kind of vacation, or even, honestly, even camping in a tent, we'd have to be there with them the whole time. And that makes it feel much more like a trip than a vacation. In this case, we did have a number of times where we were able just to hang out with the adults a little bit, or my wife and I, Emily, could do some things together, or at least take a walk or whatever. And it was nice to be able to do that. And the folks organizing it did a really good job, too, of having some different times for just kids and parents and that sort of thing. So there were different games even late at night. Our kids are too young to stay up super late, but for like teenage kids, they actually did some games even to give them something to do that's special. So it's really well organized. The camp is great. The heat was stifling, but thankfully the air conditioning helped to offset that. So it was great.
Now, question for my benefit. What about the sweets, the desserts, the cold ice cream on a hot summer day? What do they have in terms of the refreshments that I would partake of in a summer excursion?
Oh, yes. Let's see. Do we ever do? Oh, yeah, we did that a lot. With the meals, they provided dessert. So they just had one thing that you could choose from. But they also have a store. And in the past, when I've gone, I think 5 times over the course of being married to my wife. So the camp has gotten nicer in those, call it 10 or 12 years, something like that. They had a store called the Canteen where they would sell stuff about the camp. And then they also had a freezer where you could buy ice cream. And they still have that. It's a much nicer store. I'd call it more of a store now than a canteen. It's not like in the basement somewhere. It's a prominent store with nice merch and good ice cream. So we did utilize that. They actually also now have a coffee shop, which is hard to believe, but that was a nice added feature. I laughed at it when I first saw it, and then I went to it every day that I was there. We took advantage of that. They had frozen hot chocolate, which my girls got to have. So they did some more chocolate type shake sort of thing. So that was a nice little added thing that they had this time around. So yeah, that was there if you wanted. The store wasn't always open. I think it was open maybe a couple times during the day and then later at night. So the last night we were there, actually, we let the kids get a treat at way past their bedtime. So we had a special thing that night. But what is fun is the stars are just incredible there because you really are out there still, even though you're at a bit of a complex. There's not a lot of light pollution and you can really see a lot of stars. There's actually a few folks that had, I think, a telescope and did some stargazing a couple of the nights.
So how did it feel after a vacation like this? Did you feel rested? Obviously, it sounds like the kids enjoyed it, but I feel like the risk for many vacations is that you are wrangling people so much that you need a break when you get home. How did everyone fare in terms of getting their fair share of rest and relaxation?
Yeah, I would probably put this one in the middle of the different trips that we've taken with everybody. This one was more restful than some of the trips that we've had before, where we're on the go. There was stuff going on almost all the time. So it was busy and we didn't sleep a lot. We slept fairly well when we got the sleep, but we didn't sleep very long because we were up late and doing other things. And the heat just really takes it out of you. It's get how you get used to it if you live down there, but I was tired at the end of days, like more physically tired because of that, I think, than anything, just because I'm not used to it. So I put it right in the middle. It wasn't like a beach vacation where you might tend to go at a slower pace and just see different scenery and more sightsee, that sort of thing. It was more on the go, but because of the fact that we could have our kids go to different things and they could have a little bit more freedom to ride their bikes around even in the morning, we were able to get some pockets of rest that wouldn't normally happen. So
Bjorn, that camping trip, and I say camping lightly. Glamping trip sounds pretty amazing. But you have done a bunch of different vacations, a lot of traditional vacations where you have flown your family to a place, stayed on a beach, stayed at a resort, all these things. How does that trip that you just took compare to some of these other trips, pros and cons, and particularly the total out-of-pocket cost that you might have to bear on something like this versus something maybe more traditional?
Yeah, cost-wise, this one's way less expensive overall. We're sharing the cost of the camp with a big group, so that helps bring it down. It is all-inclusive, which doesn't necessarily mean better costs. We aren't going anywhere else. We're not paying different restaurants or different experience. It's not really at a destination spot, per se. We are in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma, so we're not like at a high-end resort on a beach somewhere. So on that side of it, it definitely makes sense financially. In terms of just I guess I always think of trip versus vacation when I'm thinking of going with my whole family. I would put this right in the middle. I think there was enough of a vacation because we could let our kids roam free a little bit more than if we were somewhere else. But it was still a trip in the sense that it was very geared toward family time, which is, well, we knew it going in. It wasn't a surprise. But all the activities were for the whole family. So in our case, that's all the way down to young children. And so it kind of skews toward for kids, activities for kids mainly. If I could choose, I would say I'd love to go to the beach because we just love going to the ocean. And that feels like more of an adult type of vacation. My kids enjoy that. We don't usually just sit on the beach and lay in the sun. We're actively walking on the beach or actively going to the ocean or going back to the pool and not even seeing the ocean. But that has definitely more of the kind of a draws or things that we would want to do, go to restaurants, that sort of thing, try different shops, different experiences. So yeah, I think it worked price-wise. It was enough of a blend of time away and crazy time, busy time together that I wouldn't put it quite in the camp of a getaway where you're taking it slower and sitting around more and just enjoying that sort of feeling of a vacation. But it definitely wasn't like another kind of trip where you're road tripping and camping in a tent and everything is on the parents to handle it all. We had help doing the meals and help with the place that we stayed. And I can see how actual camping would be fun, but with young kids, it would also be very tiring too. So
I could say, yes, that is probably true. And isn't the point of vacation to go and get rested and re-energized and enjoy your time and not necessarily just work, but somewhere else? So I appreciate that because that is a great one. You just took it, I think, in a way that gets you, sounds like, all of the benefits of a vacation without necessarily busting the budget like some of the other ones can. So I thought we'd get into some of our experiences traveling and share some ideas that might be cheaper for people, stuff that I'm kicking around right now and stuff I've used actually over the last couple of years here. So one of the things that I know a lot of people are doing here, I have not actually used Airbnb ever, which is, it's funny. A friend of mine swears by Airbnb.
Really?
Yeah, I've never ever.
I don't believe that. Really?
It is totally true. There have been.
Oh my goodness.
I have the app. I have looked a number of times. I've actually booked stuff before, and then in one case, we were going to go with my brother-in-law and his wife and kids, and so we wanted a couple bedroom house, and then he couldn't make the trip, so then we just decided to stay in a hotel. So there have been times when I booked and we just have never done it, nor have I listed anything on Airbnb. But you have more experience, I think, personally, and extended family and all sorts of other stuff, and I think we're going to dive deeper into Airbnb in another episode too. But can you tell me what some of the Airbnb hacks would be that might give you cheaper vacations?
Yeah, maybe now that you have a kid, you might consider looking at that a little bit more. I think right off the bat, just if you're a family that is looking for a place that, again, you're trying to make this as much of a vacation as possible. Usually if you're going, you don't want it to be totally exhausting. And so the difficulty of a hotel room, obviously, is the fact that it's usually one big open room, unless you get like a suite, but then those can get expensive. So not having separate bedrooms or separate even areas in the room is challenging. And that's, to me, one of the advantages of Airbnb is it's typically a house. You're getting different rooms. And so in our case, we can put different kids down at different times. We can stay up late. My wife and I can stay up late. So anyways, those are just right off the bat, I think, some of the advantages. I've also found that there are just more choices. If it's a hotel, again, unless you're getting a suite, you're just getting a standard room and they're all the same. And with an Airbnb, there are tons of different choices. You can get an entire house. You could just get a basement of a house. You could get a room if it's just you or you and a significant other. So there's a lot more choice, and sometimes the locations are even better than what a hotel can be. Not always, but people are choosing to some level what they want to charge too. So the market, I think, determines the pricing, but sometimes another kind of hack is if you find a place, you're taking a little bit of a risk here because it's new, but we've found places before where you can tell they're pretty new to Airbnb. They only have a few reviews. I think one place we stayed at recently only had 5 reviews. So it seemed as though they were newer to the game, but they had their price a little lower because they're just trying to get people to use it. And that's a great hack. That's one way you can save some money. Even if you let's just say it was like a condo in a place and you can see the prices of the other condos, maybe you find one that is on the newer side of being rented out and it's in a good spot. You could even look at the reviews of the other places and see what do people think about the grounds and the services and whatever, and use that as your guide, but then go with the cheaper place. So that's one thing you can do. There's a number of people that I know, even in my own extended family, who have rented out their own house or parts of their house, or even have a house that they use for Airbnb. And so if you're in a location where you have travelers, I guess, if you're by like a main city or maybe a university or a destination, I guess, in some aspect, you can definitely use Airbnb to hack your own house payment and really help, honestly, pay for it. So like I have some family that are near a university. They have a home that they rent out, and they have another spot that they can go when that is being rented. And so that's the key there, is being able to do that. We live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and so we're actually near a bunch of different destinations, and we've even considered it in the past. But that's just one way to help your own mortgage payment, your own house payment. So whether you're using it to go on your own trip or using it yourself to help offset the cost of living, both are, I think, really something to look into, very beneficial, and Airbnb has made it pretty darn easy to accomplish it for the average person.
Yeah, for sure. I know that back in the day, some people would make a website to rent out their place or room. It's just so much easier to find the stuff now. And so it's probably an option for a lot of people that was never an option before. So a great one. And I am committed to using Airbnb. I want to use it someday. So finally get my Airbnb booked. But another one I wanted to mention here. So I don't know if I told you, but a couple summers ago, not this last summer, I took advantage of a during the week special pricing for a hotel. So actually here in the Chicago area, there are a number of hotels and resorts, and actually about 45 minutes north of me, there is Lake Geneva, which is a popular destination for a lot of Illinoisans. It's a pretty big lake, and the big resort there is called the Grand Geneva. Now, the Grand Geneva is a nice resort. It's on a golf course. It has a big pool, some other amenities. It actually has a private lounge that you can pay extra for. So it's usually more adult friendly because it's away from the kids, but it's a nice place and fairly close. If you want to go to a place, I would sign up for their email list. When you get their emails, it usually tells you about the season, but also as the seasons end or as they have specials or slow times, usually they will push those out in an email, and they might not be as visible on the website, or maybe invisible on the website completely because you need a code to book it. So I would say that generally what ended up happening is that Grand Geneva was $300 on the weekends and more like $150 on the weekdays. And then they had an additional special where they threw in, I want to say, the meals. So they had a free buffet for the adults during the stay during the week. So my wife and I, we went up there, I don't remember, maybe Monday night through Thursday, and she's off in the summer as a school teacher anyway. So we ended up not spending nearly as much as we would have. And the benefit of it, and the weird thing is, we're only maybe 45 minutes away from home. But even my wife said it, as we were sitting out by the pools on a hot summer day, you don't see anything that's familiar to you. So you feel like you're away from your home, even though you could get back in the car and drive and go pick up your phone charger or something like that. Oh, I just forgot this, or I want to check mail. I don't want anything sitting on the front porch or whatever. You're that close, but yet you are checked out. It's a different location, and in this case you're in a different state just across the border, but it just feels different. It feels like vacation. It's not totally a staycation where you are basing yourself and your travels from home, but it's just far away enough that we didn't take any flights, we didn't spend a tank of gas. It felt nice, and it was great, and we would probably do it again. And it's one of those things where, because you're that close, if you get an email on Saturday that, hey, starting Monday, we have special deals, you can take advantage of it because you can just drive there. So it's not something where you have to think about, well, we'd have to get plane tickets, and that would eat up the benefit of it. So during the week travel,
interesting,
and some of the close places, and I'm sure you probably have some similar places up in Minneapolis. So if you're in any big city, there are probably places, resorts, nice hotels. And even if you went downtown Chicago, a lot of these hotels have pools, some indoors on the roof or whatever it is. Just a nice experience and relaxing without having some of the normal expenses of a travel and a destination.
Yeah. Were you driven to do that more by the deal, or were you trying to find someplace close just so that you didn't have to travel very long or far?
Yeah, it's funny because when you have nice places, I had always heard the Grand Geneva was nice, but it's close. So why would I ever pay to stay there? Because it's like you're paying for a destination type resort, but you live so close. It's one of those things where you wouldn't normally do it.
Sure.
And I think just because at $150 a night, which is actually cheap for a hotel, I think, anywhere, and then it was essentially 4 free meals, a lunch and a dinner buffet for each of us. So, and I think if you don't have that included, it's $50 a person for these buffets, and they're very nice. Seafood and steak and a carving station and all that stuff and salad bars. Theoretically, it was $150 a day, but we were getting $100 of free food a day. And I think they just want to fill some rooms and you fill the pool and bring in some money when they have a slow week. But to me, it was just an opportunity to go somewhere, check a place out that people had said was nice, but I would never have gone normally, and to take advantage of a good deal. I will also say that if you're in the area, one thing I've never done there is they do sleigh rides in the winter. So,
that'd be really fun.
Yeah, through the hills of Wisconsin on a horse-drawn sleigh. So if you like that, and again, I've never done it, but maybe if they've got a good deal during the week, I might go up there and do that too. During the week travel, and a lot of that depends on you picking a few places and subscribing to their email list, I believe. So,
you were going to grandmother's house, right?
Yeah,
the river.
Through the woods and down the main street, and then into her retirement community. So that's how the rhyme goes.
Oh yeah.
So I wanted to ask you something else, because you did something that was interesting, and this might have been a few years ago, and I want to call it house swapping, but do you recall this trip that you went on? And I think someone traveled at the same time. Tell me about that. Refresh my memory.
We still talk about this actually in our family, because it was, I don't know, it's not rocket science, I guess. Most people haven't done this, and I think this is a major hack if you can figure it all out timing-wise and that sort of thing. Just to be fair, I do not own either place here that we're talking about. These are family locations that I get to go to, but we do have a family cabin in Wisconsin, so we're talking about Wisconsin today, apparently. And so my parents own that, and that's in northwestern Wisconsin. And we had some family that lived in the San Diego area, and they grew up and had ties near where the place is in Wisconsin. So it's cousins of my dad. They'd wanted to come with their extended family up to visit. And we would like to go to San Diego to visit. And my parents and the other couple cousins worked out a deal that for a period of about a week or so, I think their family maybe came to Wisconsin a little bit longer, but we did a house swap. So we stayed at their house in the San Diego area, and they came and stayed at our family cabin during the same time. And a couple of things that we learned along the way. One was the couple of cousins actually came up a little bit early, and my parents showed them the ropes a little bit at the cabin, just because it's a home, but there's a boat on the lake and some different things that they just needed to learn about. And they were able to come a little early. And so that worked really well. And then the rest of their family came. And then our family all traveled to San Diego and got to stay at their place and do all the San Diego Zoo and go to the beach and all these things that we love getting to do because we don't live anywhere near anything like that. And same for them. They love being on the lake and in the North Woods and cooler temperatures and all of that. And so it was awesome because neither family had to pay for lodging. And so it just came down to flights and meals. And that honestly probably saves you a third of your cost or more, depending on these days. Gosh, with flight prices, it's probably more like half your cost. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to do. I hope we get to do it again or do it with other family members. But yeah, if you're someone listening and you have family, friends that have wanted to come visit your area, and maybe it's hopefully some folks so that you're not just leaving as they're coming to see you, but they want to come to your area and they're in a spot where you want to go visit. That is a great way these days to save some money and go see a different place. And then you have the peace of mind knowing who is staying at your place too. So with an Airbnb or some like VRBO, you have to set it up not knowing always who's going to be there. But in this case, it was family. So we weren't concerned about anything. And it was just a phone call away if there was an issue to have to deal with that. So it worked great. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Our cousins actually had a pool at their house. And so for my kids, like that was all we needed. We could have just done that every day and it would have been fun. And I think for their family, having the lake and the boat and just the ability to fish and all these things they can't easily do on the ocean was also really fun for them.
And I think we've talked about it. I think San Diego is one of our favorite places for both of us.
Oh, yeah.
Great town. I don't care who you are. I think you can find something that you can enjoy in San Diego. One of the things that I wanted to mention here is Amtrak. And I know that a lot of people haven't taken Amtrak, but when I was in college, actually going from Chicago back to Detroit to see my family, Amtrak was something I used a lot because I wouldn't call it super reliable on time. Sometimes it leaves exactly on time. Sometimes you have a couple hour delay. It's a little bit like an airline. But the nice thing about it is there wasn't security. You just get on. It cruises, you get some big seats, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up here, and I don't know if they did it everywhere or if it's still in process, but a couple of years ago, on the Amtrak lines, at least the ones that leave out of Chicago, they replaced all of the passenger cars with these new Siemens cars, and they are much nicer. So the original Amtrak cars that I went on in college were the same ones that you rode on up till a couple of years ago, and they were looking pretty tired. Carpets, seats, everything was just aged. You know, it worked and you still get a lot of space, but what they have done is they have replaced those cars, and so everything now is newer, fresher. The seats are still wide and luxurious. It's all the application of technology that makes there more space for people and brings down the cost, and just it's brighter and cleaner and nice. And what I would say is that even if you get a coach seat on an Amtrak train, it's probably roughly the equivalent in size and pitch and leg room as a first class seat on an airplane. And then usually if they have space, there's usually one car at the head of the train that is a business class car. They don't call them first class. And then depending on how long it is, they'll have some sleeper cars and stuff like that. But for most of the routes here, if you go from Chicago to St. Louis or Chicago to Detroit, they don't have sleeper cars. But in the business class car, instead of having two seats on either side, 2x2, it's usually 1x2. And so the seats are even larger. They're probably a little overkill. But if you really wanted to stretch out, have a seat by yourself if you're traveling alone, which I did sometimes, or if you're traveling with someone, you just have so much room. Usually you have some free snacks and drinks available to you at the snack car. The seats are usually a little nicer, a little plusher, deeper leather, those types of things. And it's can be a good way. Now, I will say that depending on the amount of travel and the time, they can get very expensive, like an airplane ticket. But especially if you are, again, traveling midweek to somewhere else, the tickets can honestly be somewhere in the $25, $35 range, because they're trying to fill some seats. And especially if you're moving a large family, it could be slower. You could take Amtrak from here down to Florida. That is going to be probably, 25 hours in duration or something, but it could be an adventure. I've actually taken the Amtrak from Detroit down to New Mexico once, and that took a long time, but it was an adventure. You get to see a lot of America that you don't normally get to see. The cost savings there might be really the intriguing part, and like I said, the elevation of the experience and the accommodations, I think, are what makes it more interesting these days.
That would actually be fun if you're planning to drive, if it's down to driving or nothing else. Then, speaking as a father who does a lot of the driving, it would be nice to not have to be on driving for a really long trip. And I've actually looked at it between here and Chicago before, and that's where it comes down to is just the time cost, because it would take longer. Even going to the airport, going through security, doing the flight, all the total time. I think from here for me to get to Chicago I think it's somewhere around 4 hours total, something like that. Whereas I'm pretty sure when I looked, it was more like a 7 or 8 hour trip. So it would be like double, and the cost isn't substantially less. So, it's a cost benefit, but I could totally see if you're road tripping somewhere, it would be nice to just be able to sit and enjoy time together. I always think of the drive as part of the trip. I think that's the key when you're traveling with a group of people, with your family. You got to remember that's part of the trip. But it's not like I'm sitting there interacting with my kids. They're doing their thing. I'm trying to drive, and somebody has to pay attention to the road. So that would be interesting. I'm gonna look into that. That's a good tip.
Yeah, you actually bring up two things that I wanted to throw in there. So you're absolutely right. When you don't have to drive, and my wife has said it too sometimes, like, why take Amtrak? Why don't we just drive? Because I'm the one driving for 5 hours, so I can't do anything else. I'm just focusing on that, and I want to make sure that I'm safe and alert, and you want to take care of your family. When all of this is happening on rails for you in a big box, you're pretty insulated from everything, and it feels very safe and it's very comfortable. So yes, all of a sudden now you get back, in my case, 5 hours. And that's probably where you have to think about that. If I were to take the Amtrak to Detroit, it was 5-6 hours. If I were to fly, I'm right at about 4 hours in total duration. So to me, it's worth it. It's pretty close. If it's going to be longer, the difference is going to spread out between flying and taking Amtrak. Although the way flights are now, with some flights getting canceled, and I was just listening to a guy whose flight got canceled, and then they booked him on another flight that instead of going from Detroit to Arizona, went to Detroit to DC, and then he got to DC and his flight got canceled. So he would have been way better off. He would have gotten there a day earlier by taking Amtrak directly. But the other thing, and I can't tell you if this happens on the Siemens cars now, I think it might be similar, but on the old ones, because I don't do this very often, there's a pedal on the side of your row of seats, so you can actually flip your seats around. So especially if you are with a family or traveling in a group, you can do that, play some cards, sit face to face and talk to each other. So as a family, and I've never really traveled with a big group, so I've never done it, but I had seen on the old cars that people would flip those around. Now, I can't say that they have included that feature in the new one because I just haven't seen it or tried it myself, but another interesting feature that might make the difference for someone like you guys traveling with a family. So
totally,
definitely worth checking out. And it just could be,
that's a great tip.
Yeah, fun. I even looked at going up to Duluth and seeing if I could take an Amtrak all the way up there. So Amtrak, maybe check it out. I'm not saying it's a perfect hack, but could be worthwhile. I wanted to ask you about basically two things here: local attractions, as well as possibly getting deals on that through employers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've actually done a lot more of that than I, to be honest, ever thought we would. We live near the Mall of America, if you have ever heard of that, and I thought we would never, ever go there because that's a tourist destination, and we just avoid those. Just like you said, it's so close that it doesn't feel like you should go there because it's for tourists. And yet, with a half-year winter that we have up here, it is really nice to have a spot to go and do some things and walk inside and have a little bit more space to let our kids play and that sort of thing. That's one spot that we go fairly often. So a couple ways we try to save. I'll talk about the employer piece in a second, but we always try to never pay full price for meals or anything. So we actually choose to enroll in all of the reward programs for every fast food and fast casual place we can. And I just don't care that I get 100 emails because I can just delete them. It's really easy. But some places we get deals like every month. And so we just go on those days. And because the mall has all these restaurants, it's a great spot to go. And sometimes we can even use 2 coupons because some kids want noodles and everybody else wants Lian Chin or whatever it is. And we can get deals there. So we've definitely taken advantage of that. Groupon is another great place that we've gone, especially for local deals, or even if you're visiting a location. I always look there first. I'm always trying to find something, because usually how we approach a vacation or even a local spot is we're not necessarily always just thinking we're going to this spot no matter what. We're open to where we might get a deal, or we haven't even planned it, so we don't even have a spot in mind. And so why not try to get a spot where we can get a discount? So if even locally you can just put in your zip code on Groupon, you can find a lot of great deals. It's shocking sometimes what you can find there. And then to your point, through your employer, often if you're working for really any size employer now, I think it used to only be larger employers, but now it's pretty common for any employer to have some sort of perks and discount type program through your benefit portal. So I know at our organization, I think most of the deals are in the Chicago area since we're based out of Illinois, but I've even thought about traveling and taking advantage of those to go to some of the museums and that sort of thing in Chicago. Take a look at your benefit portal, talk to your HR team, and just see what's out there. It's possible your employer may own tickets for something, like they might have tickets to sporting events or tickets to amusement parks or whatever, and you might even have utilized those at times. So I would take advantage of that more, I think, if lived closer to Chicago, but I know that there are some nationwide discounts that I've looked into. Maybe one good example is I was just going to look into our insurance, our homeowner's insurance and our auto insurance. And I had bundled it with Progressive and had been with them for 10 years and was re-upping. But I've heard it is great, and I would recommend it. It's really great to look at that at least once a year. And I went on to our discount portal, and there was a kind of a bundling calculator that could give you a quote. So I just typed it in, and it spit back an estimate, and it was like way lower than I was paying. And so I was skeptical, to be honest. I thought, well, that's just a quote. They're just trying to get you in. But it was low enough that I was intrigued. And so I looked into it, and I couldn't believe it, but I saved us $1,000 a year for the full year by bundling auto and home with a different provider through my employer discount. I could not believe it. And so it was awesome for this year. So we changed it all over, and it was pretty easy when you're just making a change because you have all the information of the coverages that you need, which most people don't know, like how much liability coverage should I have? How much home coverage should I have? But I was actually able to get the same auto coverage and more home coverage than I had from the previous provider. And like I said, total, I saved us over $1,000 on the year. It was incredible.
Crazy, real money.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, and a lot of times they just offer employers deals, especially if you work for a larger employer. And I've seen some really good deals on cell phone plans, even 20, 30% off a cell phone plan. So again, this is real money because otherwise you'd have to pay it. So definitely worth checking out. I would also say here, from a trip and cost saving standpoint, that there is something that I have just learned about, and they're called one-tank trips. Have you heard of this?
I have not heard of this.
You heard of this?
No.
All right, sweet.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
So this isn't really something that's made or packaged. I'm from Michigan originally. Michigan has a wonderful tourism industry, the west coast of Michigan on Lake Michigan up to Mackinac, and you can go up to the UP and Pictured Rocks and Sault Ste. Marie, and there's just a ton of places that you can go in Michigan. So this is where I first saw it, but it's not just a Michigan thing. It's anywhere that has destination. So what they call a one-tank trip is where can you get on one tank of gas? And the key is not just that you will only burn one tank of gas, obviously, which is one way to control costs. But what they are doing here is they're figuring out what is that trip that you can take that has 10 destinations, a dozen destinations on this trip that make it really interesting so that you're stopping every 20, 30 minutes. And you can do this over multiple days too. But if you think about, hey, we're going to go on this weekend trip, we're going to see 10 of these awesome destinations. And for the ones that I was watching in Michigan, they have a West Coast one-tank trip, on East Coast and UP one-tank trip. And they have all these places listed, and they're just recommendations, but they're everything from the best homemade ice cream shop, the biggest castle in Michigan, the best cherry desserts, the biggest hamburgers, whatever it might be. And so it's a great opportunity, especially if you live in some of these areas, to plan a trip that will have, I think, a ton of memories, a ton of experiences. And then ultimately, you're not filling up the gas tank because you're not doing 3 hours in between. You're doing 20, 30 minutes in between. And then pick some places that you can stop. The biggest public beaches. They just have all sorts of different stuff. And so I Googled this for other areas and lots of opportunities. There was the one tank trip Ohio listings, the one tank trip Colorado listings. So just a lot of different ideas. And to me,
I love that.
Not just the gas savings, but there were a lot of these little hidden gems in Michigan where I grew up that I had never heard about. So a lot of different places that I was putting on my list of, hey, I want to see that. I want to try that. I didn't know you could take a tour of this. If you Google one tank trip, your state or your area, I think you'll probably find a lot of options there. So something
I like that. It sounds a lot like we were in Door County this summer. It sounds very similar. It was more than a tank to get there because we had to drive across the whole state of Wisconsin again. What's going on with Wisconsin today?
Shout out to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is our sponsor this week. No.
Yeah,
I wish.
Cheese is good.
Yeah.
We enjoy cheese. But we were able to get to that location, and it was the exact same thing. It was there, every place we traveled to was within 30 minutes, and most were 10 minutes away. And I will say about Door County, if you've never been there, it feels, seriously, I've been to the ocean. This is like an ocean trip. In the summer, it is like going to the ocean, but it is a tourist place that has some high prices, but it's not as high as some locations in the U.S., and it was great. We loved it. And traveling 10 minutes, just like you said, both on the gas tank and just having kids and being in the car for a long time, it was wonderful to feel like you're going to a whole brand new town, and it was just 15 minutes away, and it was a normal length trip, just like we'd have where we live. So we really enjoyed that. I think we were able to basically have one tank really for that whole time we were there on that peninsula and go to a bunch of different locations. So totally love that idea. And I think my takeaway today a little bit is that we have to get over the hurdle of feeling like you can't do a vacation close to home. You know what I mean? Like we always think we have to go somewhere, go far away, get to as remote of a spot as possible. But if you're going somewhere new, you can do it way less expensive and get the exact same benefits of what a vacation's supposed to give you. And if you live in a spot where you've got great places to go and that are scenic, why not? Why not take advantage of those? And so, per your point of, there's all these places in Michigan that I never went to, it's probably a little bit because you lived there and you didn't feel like you could go there. That's not what you do for vacation. You go somewhere further away. And there's advantages to that too, but we both live in locations where there's a lot of within an hour things to do that are just as good as going somewhere 10 hours away.
And what I don't think about sometimes is the in-between destinations. Sometimes you're so fixated on getting to that final place, and there are just these hidden gems along the way that I don't research. Even sometimes when I drive back to Michigan, I see things like the Round Barn Winery or the Kalamazoo Air Zoo or places that I wouldn't mind checking out, but I've never done it before. And I think this is the point that they are getting people to think about, not just that end destination, but along the way, how can we maximize that experience? So something I really intrigued by, and I've been, like I said, creating my list of places that I didn't even know existed. Another thing I want to bring up here, and I may have shared some of this before, but I want to tell you how I flew to San Diego and stayed at a hotel without paying a dime for any of it. But
oh my goodness,
before we get to that, I want to talk about our sponsor, BCU. So Life Money U is a part of BCU, the credit union that we have talked about before here, a great credit union. And one of the things that BCU does here is provides you as a speaker to go to certain events. And you actually are going to an event in your hometown there in October. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what that is and what you'll be doing there.
Yeah, it's nice in the heart of things that are great close to home. It is nice to be able to be a part of a conference in the Twin Cities. So yeah, there's this Midwest Health Benefits Conference that's happening on October 12th, and it sounds a little bit more in the health wellness type space. But as we all know, well-being has really grown to include financial and mental, and Gallup has always had 5: social, community, health, mental, financial are their 5. I've seen health, mental, and financial all come together. I haven't been to this conference before, so that's why I'm still learning more about it. But it's these 3 components. And so they're asking me as a financial health expert to come and talk about pillars of financial health, but also how employers can bring financial well-being into their benefit program through either a literal program or programming to connect with the other benefits that they're providing. So yeah, really looking forward to that opportunity. I'm going to be speaking at a breakout session, and we're going to be sharing about the Life Money U program, but super thankful to BCU too for allowing me to be able to do that and to be able to talk about how this fits so well with the credit union too, because you can actually take action on your financial health goals. You can open a savings account, consolidate debt, get a mortgage, and we've got great products at BCU.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are interested in going to that conference to learn more about these topics or to meet the man, the myth, the legend himself, Bjorn Larson, in person, I'm going to put information for that conference in the description below. So we would love to see you there. Come over to our booth, get some swag, and talk to us. We'd love to hear more about what inspires you about your finances. So I don't want to bury the lead here. I have talked a little bit about this in some other places, but I did get a free trip basically to San Diego. I got my airfare and my hotels covered. And the reason I did this was actually another friend of mine, Neil Redkay, who does travel rewards hacking on credit cards. And it was almost a little too good to believe. And he walked me through it and I slow played it for a while. And then finally, when I pulled the trigger on it, I was really happy. Now, this is not something that I immerse myself in like some people. And I'm probably going to get these numbers wrong a little bit and understand that these numbers are from a couple years ago. So I don't know exactly what the incentives are. But basically, what he had showed me is that if I apply for certain credit cards, what you get is a huge bundle of incentive points. So the points that you think about, spend $1, get a point kind of a deal. And on this one credit card, it was an 80,000 point bonus for signing up if you did some things over the next 3 months. On top of that, Neil would get a referral bonus of points on his credit card of 25,000 points. So I signed up, he got that, I got my 80,000 points in an escrow account, because what you have to do is you have to spend something like $3,000 over the next 3 months on the credit card, and you will get a point for each dollar you spend. So do that, and all of a sudden at the end of 3 months, I have 83,000 points on my credit card. Now, what the suggestion was is have my wife apply for the same credit card, and she will get 80,000 points. And then we will do our spending on that credit card to get her over the $3,000. I will get a 25,000 point
referral bonus.
So now I am sitting at 110,000 points. She now has 83,000 points. So all of a sudden we're at a couple 100,000 points on a credit card after about 6 months. Now, what you can do is you can go into your credit card center. In this case, I was using Chase, and you can go in and redeem these points. And sometimes they will have some specials. So what ended up happening was if I transferred these points to United, and I'm not sure if United is offering the bonus or Chase was offering the bonus, and I've heard it works sometimes that British Airways might do it or whoever, but they were offering a 25% bonus on points if you transfer the points to the airlines. So I transferred something like 100,000 points. That became 125,000 points with United. So I booked us tickets to San Diego. So I had my round trip tickets paid for. Then I still had 100,000 plus points, and I booked a hotel in San Diego. And I did that through actually the redemption system. And so you can redeem those points. So flight, hotels, my recreation and food wasn't covered and things like that. But those are two huge pieces of travel. Maybe the lion's share of the travel, I think probably 70% of probably all our costs.
I would say so.
And so it does take some time. It took 3 months of me making sure that I met my obligations, and then 3 months of moving that. And you do have to change things like your Netflix billing account and what your cell phone that gets charged to that. So there's some work. I'm not saying that it's super simple, but after all that, we got a free vacation. As opposed to paying out of pockets, probably a couple $1,000 is my guess. All of that was covered. So that is my credit card hack. There is way more information. That is a very fast gloss over of it. But there are people who dive deep in and figure out where to transfer points and where to get them. It definitely works. I did it myself.
Wow.
So definitely something you can think about.
Very, very nice. Yes.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to ask you about here, Bjorn, is looking at sites to book travel. And there were a couple of websites that you have looked at, and I wanted to ask you if you could share some details about what you're finding to get good deals.
Yeah, so it's great time. Actually, just within the last week was starting to look at some potential travel in the winter time frame. And the first site that I went to is kiwi.com, so KIWI.com. And I'm still learning that one. It was actually my first time ever using it. But what's nice about it is you can put in where you want to travel. And so I put in 2 cities, listed the dates of travel. And I think you can even put in like a whole month if you're open to different dates. So they give you a little flexibility. You don't have to know your hard dates right off the bat. And what it'll do is it'll actually look at all of the different flight providers. I was looking just at flights for this part of it. But it'll look at all the different airlines, and I think it'll actually even take like a one-way or a leg of another flight and look at that as well. Maybe I fly one-way Delta, another way, I don't know, Sun Country Air. It didn't really matter what airline, because I'm just looking based on price. So in this case, it spit back a number of different options. I think Spirit was one of the lowest, or the lowest, and I was just surprised at how much lower it was, and I have to add in some of the baggage costs and that sort of thing, so we'll see in the end where it falls. But super slick. Just took me a few minutes of research to get going on that. The other one I've looked at is kayak.com, and that's very similar, where you can put in your dates and your locations. But what I like about that one too is to make it even a little bit easier for you, you can add minus however many days or plus however many days from your departure and your returns. But you can adjust those and it narrows it down. So I'm not just looking over a whole month, I'm looking at week range, and I'm trying to figure out what are going to be the cheapest times to travel. And so both sites are helping you, at least on the airfare side, just try to figure out what actually is the cheapest way to fly. And right now I'm paying for 5 plane tickets, so it's pretty important that we try to find the best deal.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think a lot of us are familiar with kayak, but it seems like Kiwi is just another option, adding another dimension to that. So I've actually never used it before, so that's a great tip. I am looking forward to pricing that out on my next trips as well. But I tell you what, we had so many things that we could have talked about in this trip, because for us, we are thinking about travel. We're trying to do it. We're trying to get the best deals possible. So we may have to revisit this topic again, because I think we have some other options too, and some fun stuff, and some of the things that a lot of people have heard about, staycations and things like that, but we haven't even scratched the surface yet on. But for today, I thought we would land the plane here.
I like it.
Continue on and maybe revisit this topic here in the near future. But I want to thank you for joining me and Bjorn Larson from the Life Money U program to talk about life, money, and how it affects you. So until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Bye-bye.